T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Launch Sequence Podcast. What's up? How you doing? How is it? We are back to talk about space things, spaceships, space, and I am joined by one of the most spaceshipiest of space guys in the space realm of Star Citizen, my man Execute from the Inforunners. How you doing today, dude?
I'm good, thanks. And yourself?
Good. I'm good. I am post-Christmas high, pre-New Year's low, ready to jump into a 2026 with a lot of fun stuff. There's like actually a lot of
does low mean that you're already drunk? Like you just starting early?
It's literally just a plateau, dude. We're halfway up the hill. Like Christmas is here, and then we take a little break and chilling, and then New Year's makes you fire off. But we got like a lot of exciting stuff coming up. Letter from the Chairman came out. You can think of it what you will, but obviously they're focusing a bit more on features now than they were at the beginning of 25. That has me pumped. But at the same time, we're also looking at ships, which they've talked quite a bit about over the last month coming in 2026. So I wanted to talk about kind of what ships we can expect, what direction they're headed in, and the solo players think they're going to be happy. Are the industrial players going to get some good stuff? How's the Ironclad looking? But I also wanted to talk about like what were the best and worst parts of 2025. So how about we start there? Just straight into it. What were the best ships of 2025?
I think it was the ships that kind of like function meets form. I think it was ships that kind of stood apart, and it's not always a clear cut what makes a great ship. But you know, the highlights for me are things like the Asgard.
Shininess. Of course.
Shiny ones are always good, but we are clearly moving into a variant thing where whenever they make a new ship, they also bring variants out for it. So we had the Golem just before Invictus, and then at AIE we got the Golem Ox.
What do you think of those ships, by the way? I mean, they're like sort of easy ins at the bottom of their respective professions. Were they good ships for those professions?
I think it's really important for us to have things like the Golem and the Salvation as like a taste tester. So if you kind of think about it, before you fully invest in a really expensive ship, you can rent or borrow or try. You know, that ease of access of getting into something and go, oh yeah, mining is kind of interesting. I can't. It's a bit, you know,
wet your beak.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same. That's what those two ships are. They're just a really low level entry point, so you can get your feet wet. And I think they're really important.
Solo experience.
Well, not just solo, but just like, do I want to then go get a prospector? Do I want to go get a Fortune or a Vulture, or you know, do I want to invest into something bigger? Do I want to go all the way up to a Reclaimer or an Orion and make this a full-time thing that I really enjoy?
You remember?
It just allows you to test it. No, I'm good.
Do you remember back when they first started doing the mission givers and T-Ship Pacheco was supposed to give you a mission where she like kind of rented a ship out to you or something?
Yeah, the Cutlass Chicago.
Yeah, you think they might go that direction again with some of these smaller ships like you're talking about?
I think it would be a wise idea to get people to try different gameplays. It's been really interesting to see people, like I can even talk about one with Algid for an example, right? He thought mining was going to be his thing. And at the moment he's been going out in the Reclaimer a lot. He really enjoys salvage. I remember talking about this time last year to an Australian org leader, and he was telling me that his main military person, so like his combat person, had been flying around in the Hercules when they're doing the engineering tests, and he had found that he was enjoying the engineering gameplay. So he had this combat guy that had been doing all this combat, and all of a sudden you give him this different gameplay, and he was literally saying to me, I don't want to be the military guy anymore. I want to be the engineering guy. And that, so it's one of those things where we've been talking about all these gameplays, but we've not been knowing exactly what they're going to be. And I know gameplay features are a part of really what you cover, and it is going to be really interesting to see these people. Some people have foresight and then kind of predict what the gameplay is going to be like. And this has been a big learning thing for me, is learning that some people just don't have that ability to have that foresight. And so when the gameplay finally arrives, they're experiencing it and going, oh, I really like this, or oh, I thought I was going to like this, but I don't. And I think we're going to get a lot of that going forward with, especially like what you can see is coming early next year with crafting and all the other gameplays coming in. Even medical and stuff like that. It's just going to be a really interesting time. I think there's going to be a bit of upheaval, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, even up until probably, I think it was 2023, until Alpha 3.18, the only viable gameplay in this game was mining, ship combat, FPS combat, and like running box missions. And the box missions, that doesn't even count. So
yeah,
there were like
the basics.
3 main things you could do for gameplay up until that point. Then they added salvage, obviously, and then they redid the cargo refactor, so we got cargo hauling. Now we're seeing engineering coming in, but there haven't been a lot of different types of gameplay for very long in Star Citizen. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of those realizations a lot more over the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's been a very light game until this point.
Yeah.
But you kind of got to realize well, and I know you do, but like there's just a lot of foundational works to it. Like we still don't have dynamic server meshing. It's that last pillar that we've been waiting for. And
we don't even have a functional inventory.
Do you remember Pillow Talk? Do you remember Pillow Talk?
Oh,
like from like 2018, and they'll go, "Oh yeah, we'll have dynamic server meshing," blah blah. And it's been like that's like 7 years ago now. Like it's just, I recently, me, you, and Paul sat down and watched that holiday live stream, and it was just a crack up. It was an absolute crack up. They've gone, "Oh yeah, we'll have engineering next year."
But see what that really,
and that was in 2017.
What that really sent home, the way that Chris was talking about Item 2.0 and how it would allow for engineering to happen, really solidified just how much, I don't know whether it was the way that somebody described it or the way he received it, but somewhere in the communication there was miscommunication that Item 2.0 was the same as engineering, whereas it actually was just meant to enable it. And it took them like 8 years to get from that point of enabling it to actually making it in. And like, how many things does that happen for? I don't want to get off track, but just
real simply, Cupid to Planet happened. The game literally expanded. Like it was originally you were going to fly down to a landing zone down a tunnel.
2018, right? 2017 was a holiday live stream. That was after Pupil to Planet.
Sorry, say again.
That was after Pupil to Planet. Pupil to Planet was 2016, I think, 2015. That trailer.
No. It happened literally the next year. And that's why it expanded. So that the game that we were going to receive was going to be essentially a game where you fly to a planet and you're essentially flown down to a landing zone. There was no these big massive planets and all that. So the whole game fundamentally changed.
That doesn't explain the Item 2.0 misinterpretation, which I'm not saying
because everything got pushed back.
We already knew what Item 2.0 was. Like it was on around the verse that year. And what he said was, it was not wrong. It was just a misunderstanding. And with hindsight, we know that. But at the time, the way he said it, it wasn't the way that it worked. And I don't even know how the heck we got onto this topic, but I think that was just a part of
the way it goes.
The gameplay taking so long to come around was like, it just didn't.
Yeah.
It took a while.
It's definitely been a long wait for the gameplay on that. We all agree.
Yeah. And that's okay. But back to the topic at hand.
Good to see some of it coming in this year, though. Or next year, sorry.
We got to this point because we were talking about basically ships that bring you into these new styles of gameplay. Do you think that they're going to keep doing that more so than they have with, say, the Golem or the Salvation this past year?
I think you're clearly going to see a lot more as a gameplay comes in for that patch. So say, like, kind of look what happened with the Apollo. We had a medical change a little bit, and so they brought in a new ship with it. So if they bring a gameplay into the game, like say we see data running, you're probably going to see a couple of ships come in that do data running, or in quick succession, a couple of ships that do data running. It's going to be moving a lot more to, kind of what happened at Citizen Con, where we got a bunch of fighters coming in. the kind of gunships and stuff that came in. So we had the
Yeah.
Shiv, the Stinger, and we had the Paladin all at the same
Arceus.
time.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to be like, where you kind of get a gameplay theme. That's what I think we're moving towards, because as the new, the gameplay that comes in for that patch is going to be the predominant feature, and they're going to want to give you ships that have that gameplay. I think that's what we're moving to.
Okay. So before we do jump more into what they're moving to in 2026, let's talk again about some of the better ships that came in 25. You mentioned one that I personally have a really nice soft spot for. The Paladin is
Um,
it's like the nice redeemer that we never had. We used to have these mining claim jumper missions where you just have a bunch of prospectors attack you.
mm,
I guess we can't do that anymore because prospectors are stupidly overpowered and they would just clobber us if we did it. But
mhm.
any mission like that feels like it's perfect for something like the Paladin. Have you gotten to try it out very much?
I own a Paladin. I really like it. It's a really good ship inside and out, well designed. It's showing the maturing of that ship pipeline. And fundamentally, I think you'd agree, the older a ship is, the more problem it has.
Yeah.
They had to, if you're building, let's take a real world example. SpaceX. They blow up all their rockets a lot. What are they moving on to their third version of their rockets now? And they're getting these new pads ready and all that. But they had to learn through 2 versions of how not to make a rocket.
Mhm.
They also made the Falcon 9s before that. Well, it's the same thing with the ship team. They had to learn how they're not shipbuilders. They're game developers. So they had to learn all that stuff. And you'll even see it with Ben Curtis, for example. He talked about the Polaris only recently, where he had this vision for the Polaris and how he wanted it to be. And then he's learned over the last year, getting all these feedback from people, that it needs signage and all this type of stuff. And so when they went and did the Perseus, look how much better the Perseus is over the Polaris. But they're going to now take what they've done on the Perseus and go back at and put that into the Polaris. So you look at a ship like the Paladin that's really cool and really well done. You can now start to go, wow, I can't wait to see that aesthetic on a Carrack or a Crucible. So not just an old ship, but a new one going forward. And it makes me really excited for where all the ships are going to start to move towards. And it will take time because there's over 200 ships. But you go back to something that's in a really bad place, like the Aurora, the Connie. We know that we're getting an Aurora Mark II.
Yeah, oh boy, don't get me started.
But you know why it's happening, though, because a ship like the Aurora can't have components in it. It's just too small. It just doesn't work for the current game. It's a product of its time.
Bro,
So
I
you can
mean,
see
they could really just make another Aurora slightly bigger with the components in it. They did it with the 300 series.
Yep. They did say fundamentally, right?
Even
John Crew came out.
Cutlass.
So when but again, I think it's got legal attachments. That's why I think they've changed how they do these. So when they want to change the look of a ship, right? Because a lot of them are sold on their look. That's what a Mark II is. So when he described that we want to fundamentally change the outside of the Hornet, like they visually wanted to make it different, they had to call it a Mark II. And I think it's for legal reasons. If you change the inside, I think it's a bit different.
But
I don't know the legal regulations.
I was cool with it with the Hornet because that was always part of the plan, right? Going all the way back from the beginning, they wanted to make a Mark I and a Mark II Hornet. But this idea, like once they go forward with this whole thing with the Aurora, now I'm just like, well, what stops you with every single ship? What if we get a Mercury Star Runner Part 2, which is actually made to run how the original Mercury Star Runner was supposed to, and so they make that. Runs great, gets updated, and then the first version they say, "Oh well, we're gonna make it so that it works for what it is and where it is in the game, but it's getting discontinued." I don't know about that.
I couldn't tell you the year, right? But I do remember a really, really, really long time ago, they talked about that they'll eventually update every ship, and you'd be able to buy like an upgrade or a CCU to get to the current version of it, and basically upgrade to a new version. They will eventually start marking every ship. So yeah, maybe you're right. They are probably going to do all of them eventually. But they did talk about that a really, really, really long time ago. You've just reminded me of it. And I'm just trying to remember how long ago. It was really a long time ago. It was like 2014 or something. So yeah, maybe that is a part of the plan. Just instead of, does that mean they're selling updates? That's a weird way to look at it.
I mean, we're already looking at variants of these ships that are coming out. The
Mhm.
Mantis with the Mercury, the Valkyrie with the Asgard, the Isperia with the Isperia Prowler. All of them, to some different extent, are the same chassis with some updates. And that, I
That's
think,
the
is one
negative.
thing.
That's the
Well,
negative of the ships. The last 2
yeah,
years, we've just seen so many variants. Like AIE, this. Oh, sorry, I say IAE. I meant to say IAE. This year there were more variants than original concepts.
right. Yes,
Mm,
as long as it's less concepts, to be honest. I'm like,
mm.
less concept sales is
Well,
great.
I shouldn't say concepts. I should say original ships.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? They were all, um, yeah.
No, I get
They're
what you
just
mean.
like every like right now. On my stream yesterday, we talked about the Clipper, right? If you do not get a Clipper variant this year or soon, I will be so surprised. And I went through it with Paul and Astro as we went through the ship. You could clearly see that there was just some weird choices in the medical room. I'd strongly advise you after when you go on a live stream next, go into the Clipper and look at the medical room, and then tell me why there's been certain allowances made. So, um, where the terminal is placed, normally the goo is put directly under the terminal. It's completely on the other side of the room on its own terminal. There is enough room at the end of the bed that you could have put the terminal at the end of the bed, but there's no terminal there. So you could have literally compacted it all into a much smaller space, as we've seen in other ships. But in that room, it's all spread out. Why is it all spread out? Because clearly that room has an abundance of space and there are other variants coming. You know, you go downstairs, there's a really, really long ramp on that ship that could have utilized extra cargo, but they don't use it that way.
Hmm.
Why is that? Because this ship has been made for variants. It's kind of like what happened with the Apollo, and you obviously saw the sneak peek this week, yeah?
No.
So it's literally a photo that looks like the Apollo, and it's got different lighting, and it literally says "message received."
Oh,
Now,
yes, that one that's got people
yeah,
thinking different
it's
messaging stuff, yeah.
yeah, it's an Apollo Hermes, right? That's been found in the files months ago, back when at the start of the year it was called the Aegis Hermes, and it's literally been in the
See,
files almost
now
the whole
that
year.
makes a ton of sense to me, though, because the Apollo is a
Mm.
niche ship that clearly has a good design. They want it to be used for other stuff.
Yep.
The Clipper, I don't know. I don't see why there would be a variant of that. They can sell as many Clippers as they need in the format it
The
is.
point I'm trying to make, though, they are clearly now moving to a new form of ship design where they are just building variants of everything from the get go.
How do you
They're
feel about
trying
that?
to. It just means that we're not going to be getting niche ships anymore. Like, they're just going to be like. It feels like they're trying to churn out as many ships as possible to sell more.
For as cheap as possible?
They don't feel as special as they used to. You know, the bigger ships like a Perseus, I don't think you'll necessarily get a Perseus variant, but you might get a kit
Is
that changes
is
the
that
weapons.
is that a problem? A lot of people would say the more ships, the better, because they want as much variety as possible. They want it to feel like a real fictional world where everybody's flying something different. Do you see it being a negative, though?
I think you need a mix, just like the real world, right? So the real world, you'll get people that'll have some kind of modular design. You'll get other people that do variants, but then also you'll get ships that are just literally one-offs, right? But if you look at the last 2 years, it's just been variants and variants and variants and variants and variants. There is no real modularity because again, if it had been modularity, that benefits us, right? But what they've been doing is making variants that benefit them because then they can sell more and more. It was all money raising the last couple of years, and I do hope once Squadron is out, the variants kind of stop for a little bit. Look at the Saber Ravens, right? Like that really highlighted it to me. Like
Yeah,
you
that
took a
was.
variant of a ship and then you made 3 variants of it. What?
And the
Why was
variants
it?
weren't
Why
really
weren't
useful.
they?
The Peregrine was a weird one.
Why weren't they just sabers? Why were they called Saber Raven variants? So it was a variant of another ship and then variant. What? What? How do
So,
you advertise that like that? It doesn't
but
make no
then
sense.
That brings into question kind of the nomenclature they're using. They've been doing these sort of variants, the Asperia versus the Asperia Prowler, the Valkyrie versus the
Yeah.
Asgard. They've been these like pseudo variants that were variants but weren't called variants. But now they are saying
Mm.
that there's going to be these Mark IIs. And so there are different
Yeah.
reasons to have variants versus Mark IIs, but does it all feel like it's going after the same goal?
It's look. I think you would kind of agree. I think it's all money raising for Squadron 42. They need a marketing budget. They don't have one.
Wasn't the Calder investment supposed to be earmarked for marketing?
Yeah, but I think that I don't think they sat on that. I think they went and got it because they thought they were running out of funding, right? They thought they were running out of funding because they got down to about $8 million, right? If you basically go back and look a couple of years later, once the numbers came out, it looked like they went down to about $8 million, and I think they panicked, and then 2020 hit, and if they went back in time, they never would have got that investment. They would have just let it go because they knew 2020 was coming, and 2020 they just got heaps of money.
So then why wouldn't they have sat on it?
I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But like 56 million is not a lot for marketing, mate. That is peanuts. If you look at a game like Grand Theft Auto as an example, or any other AAA budget game, generally the marketing budget is the same as what you spent. But again, those game companies also don't have to build the studio from the ground up.
Yeah.
We had 8 people in a garage when this thing finished Kickstarter, and now we're a company that that starts to rival that of the studios that work on Grand Theft Auto. But Grand Theft Auto has been in development. They're coming up on their 10th year. So we're a little longer. But if you add in the fact that they had to build the studio out, I think we're on par. To be honest with you, it's going to be a really interesting year next year. A lot of people think Grand Theft Auto is this scary beast, but I think they're separate. You've got a console game and you've got a PC game. And
All
those
should fear Grand Theft Auto if they're smart. All shall fear. Dude. If you're releasing a movie next year, you should be paying attention to Grand Theft Auto, in my opinion.
I think the biggest problem for Squadron is not the game itself; it's the marketing.
Yeah.
I think Grand Theft Auto's marketing will fight for eyeballs with Squadron, and I think a lot of games. Well, I think that's just all games are going to be fighting for your eyeballs. But the actual selling, like again, a PC game and a console game, and people that have a console and a PC, well, they can definitely afford to buy a PC and a console. And if, say, for example, what is it, November 20th for GTA, and say we did CitizenCon for Squadron 42, that would still give you 40 days or a month and a half. I could see someone buying Squadron just to play it, to bide their time for GTA, waiting for GTA to come out. And you've also got a multiplayer game in GTA as well. You don't have that multiplayer component in Squadron, so a lot of people are going to play Squadron and then move on and go play the single player and the multiplayer of Grand Theft Auto. So I think it's good. It's got to come out first, basically.
Maybe.
I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but I don't think it's as big a threat as it is to, say, other games. Like if you had a game on a PlayStation, I think would be much more of a threat than being just on PC.
Perhaps.
Yeah, we'll see.
But the ship sales have been they've been increasing, not necessarily in number, but in the amount coming into the game, right? Because we still used to get a lot of concept ship sales, a lot of JPEG sales, as somebody might call before, back in the day. What is it that set apart 2025 from previous years, in your opinion, when it comes to the actual ships delivered? Do they feel like they're getting better, or are they just becoming more derivative?
I think they are looking better, but a lot of them felt very derivative. If I list out the ones that I think were good, there was 24 ships. There wasn't 24 good ships. Let's just put it that way, right? And good is an opinion, right? I would, if you did your favorite ships, they wouldn't be the same as my favorite ships. But I think if you and I were to rank out all 24 ships, there would clearly be a lot of overlap towards, say, the top 50%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? The bottom 50 would be almost perfectly in alignment.
What's the worst one?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I have to sit there and say exactly what the worst one is. But my point being is there's a few that rise to the top. Like you can look at the Asgard was really well received. You can look at the Golem and the Golem Ox, right? They were both well
See,
received.
he's
But
ready to
then
name the best ones, but he's not
yeah,
going on the record to say which one was the worst.
well, again, it just comes down to how they kind of feel. And again, like you might like let me give an example, right? So I'll use the Peregrine from last year because that was really obvious, right? That didn't land very well, right? It was a really expensive racing variant. You had a niche ship in a racer that only racing people would enjoy. But it was also one of the most expensive. I think it was the most expensive racing ship at the time.
And
And
it's huge.
I've never seen one in game, other than the one they give us to fly around every once in a while. Like you'd get one as like if I'm flying it myself, I've never seen anyone else flying a
Yeah, I
Peregrine,
haven't seen
not
that.
once.
Nope.
Yeah,
Nope. I don't see that ship. I don't see people
yeah,
using it. I mean, it doesn't help that they've removed racing from the PU as well. It's not even, it doesn't even exist in terms
yeah,
of emissions. So,
yeah.
yeah, I feel like in terms of making the ships, they're definitely getting better. The ships have more
Making
considerations
100% agree
and
with the making part. Yeah.
yeah, but they aren't necessarily coming out for the best reasons. Now, I am unlike you. I will say that the worst ship, in my opinion, that came out this last year was the Meteor. I think that was just a
It was really
weird
bad. It was
use
really
of the
bad.
Mantis. Yeah.
Like if
Unnecessary.
you're gonna again, it was a little bit like the Saber Raven from the year before. They essentially wanted to sell the look because a lot of people liked the look of the Mantis, but you made it $100 more. You made it $245, and the ships that were around it at that price point are severely better at what they do. You made like a really niche glass cannon, and I haven't seen a single PvPer that likes that ship. They all say, yeah, you can use it, and it's really difficult, but it's just not a good ship.
Yeah. It's
Um,
again huge.
it's
Then
also
we have
ridiculously expensive for what it is.
But then we have something like the
Mm.
Wolf, which I'm not going to comment on the price of the
Mm.
Wolf because I don't know where it fits. I think it is a bit more expensive than
It
its
was
competitors in the Gladius.
it was exactly I called exactly where it was going to be, right? It was real obvious where it was going to land. It was basically $10 more than a Gladius at the time, and that's exactly where it landed. It landed in a really good spot. I think that's why it's been so popular. It's kind of like the luxury everyone wanted Origin to be, and then the combat factor. So it was luxury combat, which is just something Origin just doesn't do. You got the 325A and the 125A, but they are just not. They got luxury in Kruger first strike right on the money, and Origin just hasn't landed where luxury needs to be.
And do you feel
Um,
like the game needed that, the Wolf?
it didn't really need it, but it's a nice to have. Like you got to remember when you're a creative person, making things that are different is really inspiring, and you can tell Kruger has inspired the shit out of them. The way they talk about it, and they said that the Stingray's coming this year and stuff, and which is the next Kruger one coming.
Right.
You can just see how inspired they all are by it. Even I remember talking to when I sat down with John and Ben, and Algrid brought up Kruger, and they weren't. I now look back at that conversation, I realized how much they were holding back that they knew. They were lying to us through their teeth, but they basically talked with him and said they hadn't really been inspired that much by Kruger and stuff like that. And Agrid was talking about Kruger and how Benoit really liked it, and I got a feeling Benoit really pushed to get some Kruger ships going. So it's interesting to see
It feels
they
like
come out.
it is the kind of ship that shows the direction they're headed in terms of wanting people to care more about the ships, not just from the specs
Mm,
standpoint. Like you said, it was very inspiring to make. I think it was also really inspiring for people to fly, to see, to receive. Um,
yeah.
in fact, I'm betting that the reception of this ship would have been much worse for its bespoke nature if it wasn't such a good looking and like I don't
Mm.
want to say polarizing, but inspiring, emotion provoking kind of ship.
I think they've learned from some of the other ships they've done too. Like again, look at the Meteor, how badly those bespoke guns are received. But now you go make the Wolf and the Alpha Wolf, and you make it so the guns are interchangeable. it's not so bad all of a sudden. I've at least got some other player choice. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the way to go. If you're going to make bespoke weapons, still have a smaller selection of them. You know, um, I look at like a lot of the ships across the board. You can look at things like, say, the Hammerhead or the Perseus. Wouldn't it just be nice to have, you know, can you imagine if you change the Hammerhead from being 4 size 4s on a turret to, say, 2 size 6s or 2 size 5s or something like that?
Well,
And all of a sudden,
there's
that ship changes from punching down on fighters to being equal with the other ships on par. Do you know what I mean?
there's something to be said about customization, but there's also obviously a line. And if
Yeah.
they decide that they want to draw a line where customization ends, talking about going from the most strict kind of system where every ship is bespoke and there's nothing changing, um, let's say maybe like Star Wars Squadrons. I don't know how much
Mm,
customization there is there, but all the way down to a game where you can build every single part of a ship, like No Man's Sky or
mm,
Starfield. You have to pick where it is you want to be. You want players
yeah.
to be able to customize and change things because you need to balance around that. You need to make sure the game makes sense around that. You can't
Mm,
just start changing that year by year. You can't set it in stone and then 4 years later, when a system comes out, suddenly, oh, well, we're going to allow you to start customizing your ships a lot more or a lot less. I love a system filled with variety, but I do want them to be careful to not get caught up with a new idea and run with that
mm.
and have that tread on something old that started maybe by somebody who's not even there anymore to warn them.
Well, the other part of it is though, when you change a ship, you've got to go back to the station or a dry dock and change it over. So
Yeah.
you convert a ship to work a certain way. Like I said, if they are all size 6s on the Hammerhead, all of a sudden it's punching even, but it's not punching up or punching down. So the weakness becomes the ships above and below. And if you all of a sudden have a lot of fighters turn up, oh shit, now I'm in trouble because I wish I had the other guns on it. So you have to go back to the station and change them back to the size 4s again. You see what I mean? So there is a balance there where you have to pick and choose. You
Then
can't
that
have
might be good
both.
enough. Yeah. It just
That's my
depends.
point. Yeah.
And that could work. I
Mm,
just don't want it to, I don't want them to get too caught up with an idea and swing too far out of a way
mm.
where they
Yeah.
can't be
And then
thinking ahead.
and and then someone will go, "Oh, well, you could just have 2 handmaids." Yeah, you do, but then you've got to have twice as many people. So it's really interesting how it works because there's multiple frames of reference for balance. Like I've got to have a lot of people. I've got to have a lot of money to spend on these ships. So yeah, you can just throw a massive amount of people at the problem, but then the problem or balance moves to another point.
Yeah.
A solo guy can go out on his ship on his own, and and he's probably going to be harder to detect and have less problems. But as soon as you have multiple, it's just a really interesting mechanic how it's going to work. So there's a lot of self-balancing mechanisms in this game. It's very interesting how it's going to. Again, it's going to take time to see how it all shakes out. But
There's
yeah, it's a tough one.
There's one more ship I want to talk about before we get to 2026. Mainly because it's just so anticipated. We've been waiting such a long time for it. A
Mhm.
2013 concept, the Aegis Idris, finally landed in players' hands this year. Actually, a bit of a surprise since they had originally said they wanted to do it with Squadron. They were
Mm,
teasing it kind of that it was upcoming, and everybody got a bit of an idea of it. But by Invictus
mm,
Week, they had dropped the Idris
mm.
in player hands. Do you think that when it finally landed, it was a good showing and it felt like a good representation of capital ships, or do you think that its introduction fell a little short?
Um, there's another updated version of the Idris that we haven't got yet in Squadron. It's different. Um, so I don't know if we're going to get the update for that. It was meant to be the year of beams this year. It was the only beam ship that we got. I actually tweeted Ben and John. I want a response to that if I can get one. Where are all those beams that were promised? But then also it created a lot of problems. We had a lot of solo people going out in the Idris and just ruining other people's days. That they're literally able to take on fleets of people on their own and then just walk away. So it really unbalanced the game a lot. Um, it, yeah, it probably was a little bit. cart before the horse. I think the Idris. I do think they probably should have delayed the Idris a little bit, especially too. There was more multi-crew gameplay in. We do need more bigger ships to be able to take each other on.
You think they're kind of they started introducing capital ships too early before their deterrence or the consequences of them were in the game?
Well, you remember we weren't meant to get the Idris until Squadron 42 was out.
Yeah. How about the Polaris though? Like, do you think they should just held off on capital ships in general?
The Polaris is a little bit different because the Polaris has these really expensive torpedoes. There's not the same associated cost with the railgun. And also, when you use the Polaris, you have to have a second person to fire them. You can literally fly and shoot the railgun on the Idris. That is the fundamental problem.
Right.
And John Crew literally said that you can't have someone fire the railgun and move the railgun at the same time. I don't agree with that. It just means they've got to be in the same camera, because if you've got the crosshair as he's moving the ship around, you just press the button when he presses it. But he's talking about how it's charged up as well. But you could have a tick down timer so the pilot could see when it's going to fire. There are other tricks to do in there to do it. But I do see what he was trying to imply. I don't agree with his sorry, I got a cat problem. He's trying to lay on the keyboard. Yeah, look, there are issues with the ships, some of the ships how they are, and I think it's a cart before the horse problem. By the same token, I was with an org and we had 30 people in an Idris, and we went up against smaller crews of Idrises and Polarises, and we took on 2 Idrises and 2 Polarises, and we smashed them. A fully crewed Idris is no joke. It is. I don't know. Have you managed to get 30 people in an Idris?
Yeah,
and fully crew all the turrets?
Not since engineering has come on, but we've done it a couple times throughout the year. Yeah.
But yeah, it's you like, it's an experience, no? Like, it's just amazing. Like there's nothing else like it.
It's definitely
really great.
Yeah, it's you can see the first signs of what we've been waiting for and hoping for when it comes to capital ship gameplay. I'm waiting to see what the game can produce to make that useful. I think these tactical strike groups will be the first kind of sign of what really can be made to support that kind of gameplay, and I'm pumped for that.
Yeah,
but
no, I agree.
I can see, it's being suggested in supporters chat here on the podcast that the Idris may have been dropped early for money reasons, and we did see multiple waves of Idris sales throughout the year. That Squadron 42 marketing, as you had mentioned before.
Yep. I agree. I agree. The reason it was sold is for marketing purposes. Absolutely.
18 plus waves of sales. So it was definitely. Yeah. Do you think this is going to be something that comes back to bite CIG? They've sold a lot of really big ships that a lot of people aren't going to be able to use the way they think they can. And already I can see some of that anger coming back at them because of, the NPC crew is not going to be there for 1.0. Obviously, AI blades and the turrets have not already been made to work this way. So the backlash is starting. Do you think it's going to be so bad that CIG makes a drastic change?
We've been talking about buyer's remorse. Geez. I'm trying to think of that. Like, I remember one of the first episodes I did with C the Sixth. We did an episode called Buyer's Remorse. And it's going to become more and more evident as time goes on that people brought too many ships. That's one of the reasons we started Fix My Fleet, to consolidate your ships up and get less big ships and stuff like that. But there are people that have just been here for so long now that they've got every ship in the game. Like you fundamentally, you and I talk about this a lot. It's like you really only need that starting ship, and if you want to go a bit further, then just get one big ship and leave it at that. That's kind of where I draw my line. Learn from the mistakes that we've made along the way. But I think the other thing is, and this will be a really interesting conversation to have in 12 months from now, how big is our community going to be in 12 months when Squadron 42's come out? Are we going to double in size?
Yeah,
it's a scary time.
What's going to happen?
I think that's why we're getting the end of the concept sales too, because I don't think I don't mean this as an insult, but the normies coming along with Squadron 42, they're not going to accept concept sales. They're
Dude,
going to want to.
I don't think they're gonna accept most of the ship sales. Like they're gonna
I
have to
agree.
keep paring it back.
Yep, I think they're going to. Well, they'll just not buy them, but they're only going to buy the starter ships. They're only going to buy like the Mark II Auroras or whatever else, you know.
No, I think a lot of people won't jump in because of the optics of the ship sales. Still, I think CIG is gonna have to do something to make them at least look more palatable.
And maybe that's why we're seeing the end of concept sale too, is because they're seeing the writing on the wall. I think fundamentally at the day, you and I will both be encouraging new people not to buy massive, big armadas. We'll be just saying get a starter ship and go join someone's fleet. You know,
Yeah, but
go join an org that we recently recorded our first Fix My Org. It hasn't aired yet, but it really highlighted when you do an org's entire fleet on one image, the gaps of the ships they had and how many ships they had too many of. Right? I remember looking at one point, they had like, we're talking about they had 40 active people, but they had like 15 Polarises. Or something like that, right? And it's just you can't man that. You can't man these. So we're at that point where we need a lot more crewmen, is what I'm trying to say.
But it's not necessarily that people are seeing this and thinking to themselves, ships need to change. People want the game to change around this quite strongly. This is a comment that I read recently. It's a random thread, and I don't want people to take this as like the majority opinion. I don't think this is a popular opinion, but there are a lot of people who sit on a spectrum of anywhere from there should be gameplay for everybody, but some stuff works best for some formats, and then other people on the other side of the spectrum saying everything should be available to every person no matter what, or at least no matter how good they are at the game. So this person is saying, I've yet to see anyone offer a good explanation for why solo players should be considered second-class citizens, or why any activity, presuming it would otherwise require the same skill and effort, should be locked to only players in groups. It feels archaic, like something people cling to just because they feel like that's the way it should be without any real reason why. And I don't think that anything needs to be locked. I actually like Star Citizen for the fact that it doesn't lock stuff away. Like if you come to the front of a dungeon, it's not like you don't have 4 people, don't enter. It's more so a factor of skill. But I can see this creeping into discussions that like maybe it's not a good idea that ships require a certain amount of people, or that certain things require a certain type of ship and things like that. And I do wonder, how much is CIG willing to hold the line? See what I did there? On that topic.
Yeah. I'm still holding the line. Yeah.
Holding the call or the answering the line. I don't know.
Answer the call, and I'm still holding the line. Yeah. Look, it's tough. It is an MMO, and how do you make a game that caters for everyone? And unfortunately, you can't. And so therefore, it's the needs of the many over the needs of the few. It's just that simple. So if you want to do your solo thing, you can go do your solo thing. But you're not going to be the predominant players in this game. It is a massive multiplayer online game. Massive and multiplayer being the two operative words.
To be honest, dude, I think that most gameplay in a MMO, and this is so unfounded, guys, don't hold me to this. I'm not like a doctor or anything. I imagine most people spend most of their time playing in some kind of solo fashion, whether it is editing your apartment or upgrading your gear or crafting something or going out and running missions. Like most of the time, I think people are not actively encountering or interacting with other players. And CIG knows that.
I think that depends on the MMO, and I also think so let's take World of Warcraft for example. Yeah, in the early days, most of the solo stuff was yourself getting ready for heroics and raids. So you'd go out and do all your dailies and get your potions and that, so you could go do the raid on the weekend, or you could do heroics to probably get better gear, to get yourself geared to go do that. But then as time went on, they added in more and more gameplay features, and they added the raid finders, and then all of a sudden you were able to raid every day, right? And it's the same thing. We can look at the tools they've got planned for Star Citizen. You could literally do you could find enough people to man a javelin and just get a random bunch of randoms together through the group finder, You'll have a player rating system to make sure that they're, good people, and you'll be able to go get in and say, hey, we're going to go attack this a PVE base or whatever, and share all the loot and blah blah blah, and off you guys go and take your javelin out and go do a bunch of anarchy. It's going to be that, I think. I think it's going to be that, but a little bit sped up because they've at least planned the tools. It's just how long does it take them to get the tools? We know that there's an inventory rework coming early next year and more social tools. It's just what they bring in.
I don't know, but I think it's interesting given where we are with this game, with capital ships coming in, things like the Idris, the Perseus, the Polaris, the Ironclad's going to be coming soon. All of these things plus engineering gameplay means that this question is coming up more and more in people's minds. And as we enter 2026, and we'll talk about kind of which ships you might be seeing from 2026 now, there are a lot of questions. What direction are they going in? Are they going to keep on doubling down on combat ships so much? Is it going to be more cargo hauling focused? Will we get more mining and industrial stuff as we move into Nyx? And how much of it is going to be focused on orgs and large groups, which many players are convinced is all they care about now, versus how many more can we see maybe that are focused on the starting experience, like the Golem, the Clipper, the Salvation? So
they are clearly pushing people to play together. That is a fundamental thing. Like, they want people playing in groups. They want people playing for that multi-crew gameplay that emerges. And I know through the stuff that I've done with other content creators and on my own, remember when you and I went out in the Polaris and stuff, like that first experience and stuff, and when we went out and did multi-crew, it just naturally emerged, and just like that's one of the funnest experiences I've ever had in the game. But again, not everyone's going to enjoy multi-crew. I get that.
So when you say they want people to play together, do you mean multi-crew, or do you also mean people playing in separate ships together? Because there is a difference.
I think both. I think not just combat. I also think industrial. I think when you fold the AI back into stuff too, they'll probably want AI, being a part of that as well. It's not just going to be, it's if you want the solo experience and you don't want any people, you're still going to be able to do a lot of the stuff with AI. It's just that AI has to come when all the systems are stable and solid, because you don't want to be rewriting all that code. So the AI stuff is going to come more towards the end. It's just kind of, and it's the same thing with Squadron. If you look, they were only really starting to work on AI in the last couple of years because things were getting solidified and in place. So yeah. There's no way I can sit here and say solo people are going to have the best experience ever. I can't do that. It's not possible. It's a massive multiplayer online game. It's not. You want to play a single player experience? It's Squadron 42.
Let's talk about some of the ships that are coming in the next year. So what do we know of so far that's planned for 2026?
Well, the Hermes looks like it's not coming now, so that'll probably be in January. From what we've seen in the files, gameplay and stuff like that, it appears to be a data runner. I can't tell you the other component to it. It could literally be directly an MSR competitor, which means it's cargo and data running. That would be the likely conclusion, but I've heard some other really good suggestions as well. One of them was a people mover with data running, but until we see what that middle room is, there's no confirmation. But knowing how modular the Apollo is, like, you got to remember the Apollo was originally 43 meters, and then you look at the version that we ended up getting.
It's huge now.
It had heaps of extra space in it. It's that same problem I was trying to explain with the Clipper. Why did the Apollo have all this extra space? Oh, that's because they all of a sudden made a modular variant ship so they could make something like the Hermes. And there might even be another one after the Hermes. We just don't know.
I think it's because those hover pod things that they wanted to put in there, like they needed to make the hallway entrance bigger. But I guess that doesn't make sense. Why is it? I just don't understand why it got so big.
Original concept had a waiting room with chairs that was cut. It doesn't have that anymore. Why does it have this? You can, if you go open the Apollo, go look at where the docking collar is at the back and just look how truncated it is, but how long it is. Why is it so long? Because it can hold 32 SU cargo containers if you take that whole piece out and put a lift in instead of a ramp. or whatever.
I
But
would honestly, if they changed the Apollo and made it bigger for the sake of making it a variant, that would be
I
egregious, in my
I think
opinion.
that's what's happened.
That would be disgusting. You don't have to do that. Just
Mm.
make a new ship at that point.
And that was my whole point about what's been going on with variants. They're making changes and consolidations to things.
We'll see.
I don't know, we'll see. But again, when you look at the back of it, and like, and I called it out to Grim, and I said, "Can you go into the files and look at that for me?" And well enough, he went in, and they were grouped together. The entire docking collar assembly can be taken out as one piece. They are one group. So that ship has the 2 modular rooms, but for the developers, the docking collar is also a module.
That would really, I think, show
Mm.
just how much of a failure the Apollo situation is from the perspective both of the ships and how they wanted them to work going forward with the drones and the waiting room and all that,
Mm.
but also with medical gameplay and how much that changed. That would just, I think, really emphasize how poorly that went, that they needed to go and change the ship to make a version of the ship that would be useful.
Yeah. Well, again, at the moment, I can't confirm, but once the Hermes comes out, I think it'll be a really good example of what I'm trying to talk about.
We'll see.
We haven't had a lot of bigger ship variants yet. Like a lot of them were those onboarding tasks. I guess you could look at the Asgard and the Valkyrie. That would be the other one, but it would what they're doing to the Apollo would be on
And the
par with
Prowler.
that, right? That how many people got really annoyed when they brought out the Asgard and it was actually cheaper than the Valkyrie, and a lot of people considered it a better ship, but
Yeah.
they couldn't upgrade because it was cheaper. They had to melt their ship and buy it again, and either lose their LTI or do a melting upgrade dance to get back to getting the Asgard.
Yeah.
It just it left in a system that's very complicated. A lot of people don't know how to do that dance still.
With the positives that they've been having lately, there's still plenty of negatives in the way that they're handling these things. No doubt.
Yeah.
What else do we know about for next year?
Well, the Mark II Aurora, they said it was coming the first half of the year. I think it would be on par with where the Golem landed. The Golem came out just before Invictus because it wasn't military. So I would say it would either come just before Invictus or at Invictus for the Mark II. More than likely or not, we'll see at Drake Defense Con, we'll see the Ironclad. That'll be the big ship at that sale. The Galaxy at AIE has already been confirmed for there.
Wait, can we go back to the Aurora Mark II real quick? What do you think
Sure.
they're going to try and do? Like, what kind of ship do you think they want to compete with when it comes to the Aurora Mark II? Are you thinking Avenger Titan kind of size, or maybe a little bit bigger? Like
No. It's look. I think it's fundamentally, if you're making a Mark II, it is a replacement from for the other one, right? So it'll probably
still be a
cost
starter?
more. Yeah, I think it'll still be a starter, but I think it comes down to 2 big factors. The old one has a lot of trouble with how to put the components in it. Like, there's just no space for components. Me and Argon did a whole episode on this. We went through
they
the
have all
whole
these
thing.
stupid fins in the back. What's the
Yep.
what's the point of all the backside if you can't use it?
And the bed. And
Yeah.
they've changed how beds work. I think whatever happens to that Aurora is probably going to tell you what's happening with beds. Now, I could be absolutely wrong on that. Like, if it comes out and it's just a literally the same ship on the inside type of thing, and it's just all a visual upgrade, then the visual upgrade had something to do with the components. We only found one spot on the old Aurora where you could put components, and it was probably at the neck, and you had to have some kind of special, on the backside of the MTC, how they had all the components come out, like they kind of came out like a choo-choo train, and they went off to the left and right. You'd have to do something like that, but on each side of the ship to get all the components in, and they'd all be in the neck, so it would be like hyper vulnerable to attack. The only other option that we could find was in the floor, in front of the bed. There's just no space in that ship at all.
No, I get that. I mean, but like they still have to make. They're still gold standarding the original Aurora to have components, so it's not like the Aurora Mark II is going to fix that problem on its own. They're doing something else with it.
Yeah, Well, maybe they turn it into the version that VMXMO made. I'm sure you've seen that, the one with the wings.
Where they split apart.
Maybe. Who
I don't
knows?
know. I don't know. I'm interested in knowing what they would want the competitor of it to be. I'm guessing they make it so that it fits what a new starter is. Kind of like you're saying. Like
Yeah.
this is the Aurora that competes with the Cutter or the Intrepid, as opposed to the Aurora that competes with the Mustang. But then you ask yourself, okay, well, what's the original Mark One Aurora going to be? Is it going to be this just less than useful sort
Well,
of gimped starter?
you could technically make the Mark II the advanced starter. RSI does not have an. Well, I guess
Yeah.
the Salvation's kind of an advanced starter, but
No. That's a professional starter.
but exactly. So you don't really have the advanced generic starter, and so does that what the Mark II becomes? I don't know. I again, like the only thing that I've found with CIG that is consistent is just how inconsistent they are. Right? They break their own rules all the time. They don't follow their own law. They kind of just ride by the seat of their pants. You know, you get law people that come along. Like we've got these history buffs like Algrid and Expat and Paul and Nonstop Bops, and they all talk about things like you know, you have things like Corvette and frigates, and in Star Citizen they're backwards. You know, you got battle cruisers were meant to be this, but it's and then it's swapped with a destroyer that like they've named them all in the wrong spot, right? And they don't go back and retroactively fix that. You know, you get things like the Ares that came along. They had all this lore for Crusader that basically made them essentially like the Mormon pacifists, and then all of a sudden they're making big warlike ships
Christian
that blow people out of sky. Yeah, but you get my whole point, right?
Yeah.
The point being is that they just break their own law without any care, and the writers have just got to fix all these gaps. I just hope eventually they start to follow their own shit. Like there's normally when you do you do like a game design doc and a law doc, and they're almost like a bible that you try and follow, right?
Mhm.
Not always so much with the law. The game design can override the law, but realistically, let's just take the Ares one as an example. Couldn't that just have been a different manufacturer? Can you imagine, for example, if that had
And
been
Anvil
Kruger
Ares would have been sick.
or that?
Yeah.
You know, but Algrid's a big fan of it being Kruger because of the Merlin with the big gun in the middle, and it had the big size 7 gun.
Yeah.
So again, you could have made it a Kruger ship, but the point still stands is that they need to start following their own shit. You know, when I sat down with Ben and John, and Algrid was there as well, he literally called the Ironclad a Corvette, and I said, but it's a completely different size class to the Polaris, and the Polaris is a Corvette. You're talking to S4 versus S5. How can they both be Corvettes? And he looked at me confused as hell. He didn't know what the hell I was talking about. You know, so they don't follow their own shit. And I, you know, for years I said, why aren't you guys using metrics? And now they're using metrics all the time. You know, we saw shit like the Odyssey come along, and all of a sudden it had a standardized metrics based hanger. But the Polaris has this weird augmented one, and the Carrack's even worse. It has this weird augmented one. They made them to fit certain ships instead of using metrics.
All loose shooting for quite a while.
Yeah, and I just think it's taken them a really long time way longer than it should have done. Yeah. Right? They now seem to be taking a lot more feedback on board. Like I said about Ben hearing about the Polaris problems and then implementing new stuff in the Perseus. You've got all these really passionate people in our community, whether they're military or miners or geologists, you pick your profession. You've got all these advisors out that will happily give you the advice for free. And I think it'd be a really good time to start utilizing it and using it, because I think the ships that have that information passed on or utilized in, look at the Perseus versus the Polaris. That just tells you in what the difference a year makes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. Let's talk about let's see, you mentioned, what else did you mention was coming next year that we haven't talked about yet? The Ironclad is definitely
Galaxy.
a big one. Galaxy. Yeah, so the Ironclad and Galaxy are probably going to be the two most hyped ships, at least that we know of so far. Do you think that the game is ready for the Galaxy, though? Because with that comes a big question about modularity, and they have been a little weird about that so far.
So I think the missing link we have at the moment to get to crafting, right? I think base building's kind of been moved a little bit off the table. If
Yeah,
you go
totally.
into the roadmap roundup and go into the roadmap, you can see that base building kind of stopped back where it was originally intended to stop, but then crafting and engineering and that all got extended into early next year. So I think they've gone, we've got too much here, we've got to crop a bit off, and they've dropped base building to focus on crafting.
Yeah.
Right. But to get to crafting, you have to be able to take resources out of the game, and we have those. We have mining and we have salvaging. But to go from mining to salvaging to a craftable material, you need refining. And we don't really have refining other than in stations right now.
Yeah.
So the Galaxy is going to do that, but also the Expanse can do that. And up until recently, I thought they were also going to include it in buildings with base building. Because then, if you can just take what's on the station and put it in a building, right? But I think having chopped base building, they're going to need the ships that do it.
Which now it's like, okay, do you think that running space stations as a player is still a 1.0 target?
No.
Because we're entering 2026 and base building is still not even.
I think it'll be building bases is the 1.0 target. I don't think it's space stations. I think space stations are after 1.0. They're just too big.
I was blown away that they even put that in there in the CitizenCon last year. That was so weird to me.
Well, they talked about the Consolidated Outland Forge being paused. And essentially, it's like a mini Pioneer now. And well, if that's paused, then I'm pretty sure the Pioneer's paused as well. Because you'd assume that the smaller one's easier to work on than the big one.
Well,
so
we just learned about the Forge, right? This is a crafting, ground extracting, mining spaceship from CNOU. It sounds incredible. But it was supposed to, it was the last ship from the 2024 silhouette video. It did not make it in 25. They are not sure if it's going to make it in 26.
It's actually 3. There's actually 3 on there. Three vehicles that haven't come yet. So you've got the Exilia, which is essentially a ground-based clipper. So it's like a medical fabricator ground support vehicle. So it'll repair the other ground vehicles and medical stuff for the troops. And then you've got the MFC, which is a ground crafter that looks like an MTC or an MF. What do you call it? God, I hate the acronyms of these goddamn ships. The Grey Cat ground vehicle things. All right, we'll just call it that.
Who makes the Auxilia?
It's basically an Anvil platform variant. So it's
right.
The Atlas platform.
Yeah.
It looks like that.
Did they say those are going to be 2026? Those 2 ground vehicles?
I think they were heavily implied for last year, but they didn't make it. So I think they are coming next year. Knowing that crafting is predominantly coming up now, I would say the Fabricator's probably coming at Invictus or around there. And then the Exilia being like a ground-based clipper, I think that's also a big contender for around Invictus as well. Like, again, they'll come when they come, but I think they're pretty much on the cards for next year. Yeah.
So we got the Exilia, the MFC. We also have the little ground push cart that they want to be able to be used for crafting. The Clipper just got crafting, and then the Forge also is supposed to be crafting related. All of those except for the Clipper have been seemingly delayed because clearly crafting was meant to be a 2025 focus.
Agreed.
But they cannot confirm that crafting is coming in 2026. So none of those are actually something that we fully expect.
I think crafting is they want crafting for Squadron, as in when Squadron releases, they want Star Citizen Clear to be in a better place.
Yeah.
And I think they've dropped base building because it was just too big and they couldn't get it in time. And I think that's become the 1.0 thing. And they've also said 1.0 was like 2027, like a year later or whatever. But I think
No, keep going.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was just I was just going to say, I think they're now intending to get crafting for when Squadron goes out.
Isn't it crazy that they were talking about, like, they introduced base building? I mean, they talked about it in 2017, but they really introduced it in a big way at 2023 CitizenCon. And then even then didn't know that it was going to be too much. And so then came back the next year and introduced space station building. Like, When are they going to learn, dude? I feel like they have, but God knows what they're going to say next year. 2025 does definitely feel to me like they learned a little bit more about the messaging and the setting expectations and the trying to build hype when they don't need to. It's just crazy that we are
I,
trying to figure out which ships are coming next year, and we're basing our ideas on it around a feature that was, obviously expected much earlier.
well, they also talked about the ships that they listed every manufacturer that was getting a ship,
Hmm.
and you can kind of look at a lot of. Me and Grim went through on his stream all of them, and there was only like 2 manufacturers we couldn't work out um, a ship for that we knew of or that existed.
Who's coming from Origin? What do you think it's going to be, the G12, or do you think there's something else coming from Origin
That
next year?
that that's the safest bet is a G12. Um, but I also wouldn't rule out a fabricator from Origin. You know,
I would love
a high
a Clipper competitor from Origin. I think that would be
or
really cool.
just a high design crafter, because you got this is the other thing, we haven't really got into a point where we've got different tech levels in the game. We've got high, medium, and low tech, right? You can kind of look at the 3 systems we have in the game. Pyro is low tech, Nyx is medium, and Stanton is high tech, high quality. You can also look at it as high, medium, and low quality, right? And the variant I always give that kind of helps me confirm it is shops, right? We know you've got the Privateer, which is a Drake ship, which is obviously low quality, and then you've got the Banner Merchantman, which is clearly high design or high quality. And there's only 2 shops difference in the size of those ships, right? They're both capitals, but that probably means that we're getting a lot of large, a lot of medium, and a lot of small. And for example, if you have a taco truck, what manufacturer do you think that would be in, as an
Drake.
example? Would you ever see a taco truck in an Origin ship?
No.
Exactly.
Nice tacos.
But if I have like a Gordon Ramsay's restaurant, would I have that in a Drake ship or in an Origin ship?
Honestly, I'd think Crusader.
Okay. Well, again, that could be in the middle, right? The
Gordon's
point I'm
like
trying to,
Crusader
yeah.
kind of guy. Yeah.
If you have a mining store, it's not going to be an Origin ship. You don't really see high quality mining ships in game right now, but you'll see them at Levski and you'll see them at Pyro, right? And then when you also see them at the stations, they're more of a middle quality. They're not a high design quality. So you kind of have to have these different styles, and we don't really have that yet. And again, if you look at that style guide, do you remember when they did the Solian episode and they had all the professions with the manufacturers of what they do?
Yeah.
Origin was literally in the middle of high design and commercial. We haven't seen a single commercial ship from Origin. So we've probably got a lot of shop ships coming from Origin. You work this all through. There's all these things that we just haven't seen. We haven't seen agriculture. We haven't seen, the farming ships, but we know they exist because we've got these modules on the Endeavor.
So then what do you think it is that we're going to see mainly next year? I mean, we've been talking about certain ships. Obviously,
it ties to profession. It ties to profession. I think we are going to see a lot of crafting, refining, hacking.
refining ships. You think we're going to see player refining in the game next year?
I think it's a necessity. If you're going to do crafting, you have to have a way to feed the materials into the crafter, right? And unless they're just going to skip refining and go, here, you chuck in raw ingots, they could do that, by the way, but it's a stopgap. They've already got refining at stations, so just taking that default tier 0 gameplay and applying it to a ship, that's what I think they're going to do. If they dial it back, which they could well do, it means the bottleneck is going to be imagine all the fabricators are going to be sitting around stations waiting for resources. It just creates this bottleneck. So you really need to have refineries online. And again, the Galaxy's coming. I think it shows that refining is coming because of that refining module, right?
I hope so.
And I think they may also do the Expanse because it's a very small ship, right? They're doing the whole B. So doing the whole B and the Expanse at the same time sounds like a smart idea to me. It allow you've got a lot of the Hull C, you've got a lot of the other manufacturers kind of from the MISC lineup worked out that you've got a fairly well built up library of MISC pieces there. I think you could do the Expanse relatively quickly.
That would be interesting. They haven't talked about refining nearly enough to make me feel like they're working on it thoroughly, but I hope so, because it is an important part of industrial gameplay.
I reckon I'm just thinking tier 0 at this point. Take what's in the station and just allow the ship to do it on the move. I don't think it'll be an active gameplay. I think, and if they want to make it active as in you get a special perk because you're doing it on a ship, they just make it work twice as fast because it's in a ship.
What about the Stingray you mentioned earlier? Where do you think? Oh, that's a Kruger ship, right? Have they mentioned what that is?
No, they just gave us the name and told us it was Kruger. But honestly, knowing that Kruger is essentially combat military, luxury military, I'd expect that it's probably a medium fighter. And they seem to be working their way up. And talking with Paul and Algrid and a few of the other boys, I haven't asked you, but yeah, that seems to be where we think it would sit, is like a medium fighter. And there are some Stingray cars and there are some Stingray planes, and you could see how they would lend very well to what Kruger do.
Do you think? Yeah. I think there was supposed to be an Argo medium salvaging ship that was teased at one point a while ago by John Crew. Do you think that's a possibility for next year?
It was Ben Curtis, and it was called a large orange salvager.
Right. When was that? Was it Invictus this year?
That was in September, but orange doesn't mean it's Argo.
Right.
Because you've also got Consolidate Outland that use orange as well.
Yeah.
If you were gonna call it Argo, wouldn't you just call it Argo? But I think it was a misdirect saying large orange.
Could be. But he said it's a large salvager?
Large salvager. Yeah. So that's in between the Vulture and the Reclaimer, but they also need it. If you think about it, we've got the entire mining lineup up to the Mole, but we don't have the Arastra and we don't have the Orion, but you've got the Reclaimer and you've got the Vulture. So give us the one in the middle.
Yeah, it makes nothing sense. Equivalent to the Mole for salvaging.
Yeah.
So
which is what you kind of need to be able to pull off crafting properly.
They say that's a next year kind of thing. Did he give any sign of timeline?
Nope, he did not. But he just said it was coming. So I think we're going to be eating really pretty for ships this year. Both the mix
at least two every month, right? 27 they said it's going to be.
Yeah. But again, if it is just variants,
dude, 27.
I'm not going to be happy.
You can't even.
Yeah.
We know there's going to be quite a few variants, but even just looking at the ship list we've talked about here, there's a new Generalist ship. We know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a competitor to the Clipper. We've got the Ironclad, the Galaxy, and the Stingray.
Mm-hmm.
That's four unique ships.
I wouldn't say it's a competitor. I would say it'd be in a different size class. I think it's probably going to be like a large ship. So think like an Andromeda or an MSR or a Corsair.
What are you talking about?
You know how you said a competitor to the Clipper?
Oh.
So that's the Clipper's a medium ship built for one person, right? Yeah. But if you go up, so maybe think of it as like a large ship, kind of like the 400i, where the 400i is really a medium ship that's the size of a large. Think that, but it's a fabricator and medical bed and stuff like that.
Well, I'm talking about, there's some kind of generalist ship. You think it might be like a larger version for multiple people?
Yeah. Okay. I think it will be a larger version that's tailored to, 2 to 3 people.
Okay.
Kind of a bit like the 400i.
Yeah, I guess I took it just to mean another solo-focused one, but I would be interested in seeing what a generalist medium...
They always talk about trying to fill out the grid first before doing double ups.
Okay.
Right? And the first double up, if the manufacturing module for the Galaxy turns out to be a base builder like the build, it'll be officially our first double up. But again, I don't think it's going to work out well for the Galaxy owners, because modular. One of the things we learned when we talked to John is essentially if you get your niche bespoke ships, then you get your variants, and then you get your modular ships. So the build being a variant, it'll actually be better than a modular ship. So straight off the bat, if you want the better base builder, just get the build.
think the build is actually
Um,
an interesting sign because we're not hearing anything about it. Again, lending back to the fact that base building is coming later than they probably
it,
wanted.
it's connecting those dots too, like knowing the forge has been paused, knowing that the base buildings kind of stopped work being done on the roadmap. Um, Probably also means the pioneer's been paused, which also means that the build, Silence build's just sitting there waiting to go as well. It it doesn't mean it won't pick up again, but it shows me that they've started to prioritize for polish what they think they can get done by the release of Squadron. And when is the release of Squadron going to be? We don't know if it's February, and we don't know if it's December.
Yeah, they definitely
You know
had
what I
to
mean?
make the call for sure by like September of this year.
Mm.
They probably got
And
everything locked in.
yeah, and talking with Paul, we did an episode that'll be out in a couple of days' time, the year behind and the year ahead. And me and Paul are kind of in agreement on February to March. So February to Invictus, which is April or May. In that time frame, if Squadron's coming this year, it's got to start. That's where the marketing ball's probably going to start rolling. Yeah.
I don't think it's going to come out later than October.
I think it's going to be a really weird year next year because wherever Squadron lands, that's going to be akin to what the normal end of year patch is. Do you know what I mean? So if that rolls all the way forward to October, that means the year's 3 months shorter, type of thing.
Yeah, it also means that there's probably going to be a big crater of Star Citizen development somewhere in 2026 where things really slow down for us.
How many people do you think are going to leave CIG when Squadron's finished?
Depends on how the launch goes. I really do hope. I mean, a lot of people are obviously there for Squadron specifically, but I do hope that a lot of people who are there for more of the gameplay focused things are able to be
Mm.
retained and kept around because it's important that they keep some of the DNA in Squadron
Y-
in Star Citizen.
It's going to be multiple faceted too. Like how many people are going to get better job offers? How many people just want to change because they're sick of working on the same game? You just can't
Yeah,
tell.
yeah,
Like
it's
it,
going to be a big changing moment for this whole project.
yeah, absolutely. And, I think a lot of them will just say, all right, I'll stay, but I don't want to work on Squadron. I want to go work on Star Citizen for a bit or whatever. So there's going to
We love
be
that.
moving
Do it.
of musical chairs, basically.
Work on
And
Star
there,
Citizen.
mm,
Uh,
mm.
let's finish up this list of ships that we've got. Are there any that have been mentioned or talked about that we haven't gone over that could be showing up in 2026?
I'm trying to remember the list of manufacturers, but I have somewhat forgotten. I do remember that was one of the ones that we couldn't work out was Aegis. And there was no ship that we are currently aware of being made by Aegis, so there is more than likely some new Aegis ship coming.
The Javelin.
Um, potentially.
That actually, I was kind of joking, but it would make sense for them to release it with Squadron.
Yeah, it would. I think if they're going to release it, it would be before Squadron actually for the funds. To be honest with you, I think there's a lot coming at Invictus, like a lot. I think we're going to see a lot of pushes at Invictus. The Ironclad, and other ships come then because if Squadron comes, they're going to need the funds. I'll put it this way: when Squadron comes out and the money starts rolling in, how much of that money do you think they'll turn around and reinvest into marketing?
A lot. I mean, I think that's probably the main focus for the next year after Squadron is like getting it into the zeitgeist of the gaming community, making sure it has legs, making sure that like bugs are getting fixed and stability is good. But there also is going to be a lot of pressure on Star Citizen once Squadron comes out, and this is, I think, the biggest thing to laugh about at the idea that Squadron came out in 16 or 20 or any of those years is like there is going to be so much pressure on Star Citizen like never before when Squadron comes out, because not only does it now have all of the expectations and reputation of its troubled past, but it also
Mm.
has to live up to the single player game. And clearly it's not running on the same tech as a single player game. So people outside of this community, they're not sitting here thinking, oh, well, they got server meshing working. There's at least that.
Mm.
Oh, well, they're connecting multiple star systems and updating things for thousands of people at the same time and maintaining this database. They're just gonna
Mm.
jump in and be like, this doesn't run as well as that single player game. They made a single
Yeah.
player game, but maybe this MMO is just still stuck in development hell. And if people bounce off like
Yep.
that is the literal biggest moment they have to bring people back for good. And if they start bouncing people off like
Yeah.
that, then they're gonna have
Yeah.
problems.
They really needed Star Citizen to be at a better place than it is right now. They yeah. It's a bit of a weight round Squadron's neck. And again, I just remember when the Hold the Line trailer came out, there was so many people in the comments, like on the IGN re-put the trailer up as an example, and someone would go, oh, I really like this, I'm going to buy it. And then I remember saying, oh, it's really good to see people talk positively about a Star Citizen game. And then he's going, this is not a Star Citizen game. He goes, yes, it is. And then he's linking in all this stuff from,
Yeah.
and there was multiple comments like that where people just don't realize Star Citizen and Squadron are the same universe.
They should keep it that way for now.
I think that would have been the safer play in hindsight, but I also think it's a really missed opportunity not to advertise Star Citizen as a multiplayer component of Squadron. And I think they are going to do that, and I think that's why they've been trying to get Star Citizen like they did the Year of Stability.
Absolutely, man. Honestly, I think they could have a real hit on their hands. I'd like to talk about, I think we've touched on almost all of the ships that we think are coming so far. We can rope it in a little bit more if it comes up, but I want to talk about how the delivery of these ships might combine with what we're talking about here to make for a pretty big year for Star Citizen, because I do think that if they're advertising Star Citizen as the multiplayer component, Squadron 42 comes out, does pretty well. Let's say maybe they announce like a future console port for Squadron, possible VR support. Then they drop Arena Commander actually somewhat working on Steam as a free to play to drag people over to Star Citizen. Like, I think all of these, there are a lot of avenues they could use to market this in a way that doesn't cost a lot of money, but pulls people into the just surrounding sphere of this project. Do you think that?
Look.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you think that they're going to have a breakout year next year? This year was great, but do you think that with Squadron 42 releasing and such a focus on so many ships, it's going to be a truly special year, or kind of just like more of the same trajectory?
I think Squadron will be really good. It's just, is it a double-edged sword for Star Citizen? Star Citizen is clearly not in the best place. And yeah, while it runs really well right now, there's just not enough gameplay. It's not a game.
But I hear this weekend it's pretty rough.
It is pretty rough right now, but let's be honest, they'll get that fixed, right? That's just teething issues of a patch going live. I get that, right? And it was a bad time because we're obviously going into Christmas, but like a month from now, as an example, I don't think it'll be an issue, right? So that I'm just going to water under the bridge, because let's be honest, it's got more and more stable as the year went on. And, the Vulcan coming in 4.5, everyone got a massive performance boost. Game runs well, right? Just put it that, right? But there's just not enough game. That when something works really well in Star Citizen and everything's firing, like you're doing the multi-crew gameplay, like I talked about on a Polaris or Perseus, it's amazing. When it does well, it does really, really well. But there is just not enough gameplay there. For me personally, it might be different for some other people, to just keep me. I can't play it 24/7.
Yeah, dude,
right?
no.
Right?
I just
I don't
like
understand how I don't know how people like yourselves just stream it all day. I can't do that.
That was a lot last week. So for my birthday, for anybody who didn't swing by, we basically did an uncapped subathon starting on my birthday, 10 hours every day for a max of 5 days. We made it to 30 hours, 28 hours. And I would never have done this kind of thing before this year. I actually slowly started to get more into this. For anybody who's been following a
Mm,
long time, it took me a while to really get into gameplay with Star Citizen, and I agree, there's still not enough here to be a full game,
mm,
but it is possible now. It wasn't before, and for somebody who's got space-induced brain damage like myself, it's really fun to just be in the game for a long time, but I will
mm,
100% agree, even for a newcomer getting into this game, as a casual player who's not super interested in like a space sim,
mm,
I think this game would get boring very quickly because yeah, it's not even just that there's not enough to do. There's not
mm.
enough momentum. There's not enough current. You don't get any push from the game to do stuff.
I do hope, though, we are finally starting to get some of those things I've been talking about, like scanning, right? That's kind of there. It looks like it's implied that that's coming early next year. Um, Even the most basic core gameplay loop in this game is still not really there, which is um, I have something of worth, whether it be cargo, salvage, mining. Bad guy can find it. Good guy's going to try and stop him. We don't have that yet because the bad guy can't find you with the scanners. We
Yeah.
just don't have it. And all that emergent gameplay that'll come out of that. It's the same thing with the crafting loop. We don't have that yet because we've got the extraction. We can pull the things out of the game, but I can't turn it into the material that I can craft stuff with. So you need the refining loop to be able to pull that off. And also the other side of that would be the salvage to pull it down again. You see what I mean? So the loop is almost there, but there's a link missing out of the chain. So until we start getting these full gameplay loops that can go around and around and around, we don't have a single one yet. Like I guess someone could say going out and shooting something and coming back, go taking a box from A to B, but that's not a loop. That's a line, right? So until we have a loop, you're not going to get that repetitive factor. And
There's a
we're just
pretty there's a
so
good one
close.
now. There's a good one now. Going out, like you can run a pretty nice complex loop if you take out some people. You do bounties or ship combat. You take out the ships.
Mm,
You bring in your salvage crew. You strip your components, your weapons. You put
mm.
those away. You crunch the ships. You store that away. You go and you sell that. It's like a decent loop, but I totally get what you mean. Like there is a
Yeah,
full economic loop that's missing.
yeah. We've got links in a chain, and you connect two or three of them together. But when does it start becoming an actual chain, and not just a couple of links? And that's what I'm saying. Like we need the full loop, and we're just on the verge of it, right? And we've been on the verge of it for so long. Like, that they're saying, "Oh, this is coming," and it's just always been delayed by another year. There's that perpetual joke that Star Citizen's always 2 years away. I
Right.
cannot believe, by the way, when I sat down at CitizenCon and they were rude enough to bring out 2026 in 2024. I was, it's like 2 years. I thought that's
Yeah.
just playing into the meme at that
Yeah.
point, right?
Yeah. But here we are going into 26. They haven't announced a delay for Squadron yet. Like you said, there's a big link missing in the loop, which is honestly it's
Mm,
crafting, it's refining, it's the creation and death of objects.
mm.
So like the steps have been taken, and there is a good possibility for this kind of stuff to really take hold next year.
Yep.
But are they actually going to capitalize on it? Do you think that do you think this could finally like it's painful to even ask because it feels like we have this conversation every year.
We do.
But
It feels like that, doesn't it? It really, really
but
does.
is this finally the year that this project takes off? Not takes off maybe, but enters the mainstream consciousness.
That's a really tough question to answer. I can only think of how I would go about it. And I would have to think initially right now, it's all hands on deck to get Squadron 42 done. That said, in the immediate after that, you would then really turn and try and get Star Citizen up to par as quickly as possible. So they're always looking at their priorities, and I think you'd have to agree Squadron is pretty much a priority right now, yeah, and it has been for a really long
Dude, they
time.
literally, yeah, I actually can't believe that they said on the 2023 financial report, they were like,
Mm,
we're just gonna take money. We're just gonna stop putting this money towards Star Citizen and put it more towards Squadron. They just came out and said it.
mm, mm. But
So
it was
yeah,
time to, you know, stop fart assing around and get shit done.
Yeah.
And they needed to do that. And Squadron should have been out years ago. Like it really should have at this point. It's taken way too long. It's been, it's essentially been holding Star Citizen back, right? A lot of people have brought ships for a multiplayer game, and we still haven't even got the single player game. And most people are wanting the multiplayer experience. The single player is just a nice to have. And I think a lot of people are going to be relatively happy to get the single player out of the way in hopes that they're going to get more multiplayer.
Yes.
I know I'm one of them. And again, if Star Citizen has to be a weight around Squadron's neck for them to actually start working on Star Citizen, then so be it. I just, it's just, how do I answer and read the minds of what CIG are going to do? Because as I said, they are just the only consistent thing is how inconsistent they are.
Well,
they could just come out and start instantly going into episode 2. It really depends on how. Look, if Squadron comes out and it's like the most successful game of all time, do you think that they're going to focus on Star Citizen, or do you think they're going to work on episode 2?
I think they're going to do both. I genuinely think that they will put good effort into both if it's very successful.
Knowing the passionate people they are, I think that's where it's going to be. They're going to, in the short term, try to get Star Citizen up to a better quality standard, get the foundational things done, so then they can start putting a little bit of gameplay in every patch.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
And then probably do both at the same time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there have always been names in CIG that are both advocating for Squadron priority and Star Citizen priority. But because Chris is so Squadron focused, Star Citizen has never really gotten the priority. I think that that's going to remain the same. I think that even if Squadron is successful, there will be the people who are saying, this is great. This now we finally have the resources to push Star Citizen forward.
Many of the developers I talked to at CitizenCon were very much like, we just can't get people to help us make the tools we need to make Star Citizen because they're all working on Squadron.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's
Todd Pappy before he left was always pushing for more people to work on Star Citizen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. This has been a great talk about ships and 2026 and just kind of the direction we're going in. Little tradition I've been doing with the launch sequence now is everybody who comes by has to put in a little hardcore, spicy hot, super fire prediction for the next 3 to 6 months in Star Citizen. We've had some people say things like Planet Tech V5 coming in the first half of this year. We've had a guess that Squadron 42 marketing is beginning in the first quarter of the year. We've had a guess that people will be disappointed in 3 months. What would you like to put in as your submission for this show over the next 3 or so, maybe 6 months? What might we be seeing?
My hope would be that there are less variants this year in the following 2026, and some of the ships do point to different gameplays. So moving away from the ghastly variants we've seen over the last 2 years, like not this year, but last year was really bad for variants with the Peregrine and stuff like that. But I think it would be more gameplay focused ships is what I'd want to see, and I think we are going to get that. Well, that's my hope.
Awesome.
I think we'll know very quickly. Yeah, in the first couple of months, I think we'll know.
I got you listed down.
Definitely buy Invictus anyway.
Yeah, we'll have a good. I think we'll have a good idea by the end of quarter 2.
Sorry if I tangented too much there. It was meant to be all about ships, and we just talked about everything.
That's fine. People get good information out here. That's why you're here, right? The launch sequence, your number one stop for rambling Star Citizen feature and other stuff conversation with a tomato. Doesn't happen too often. Execute, though, my friend, you also host a show. You host live streams. You post on the tweets. You have a community. Tell the folks where they can find your own content and things and stuff.
Just Inforunners on YouTube and Twitch. And yeah, we do many different things. Very ship focused, though. Yeah. Very, very ship focused.
Yes. I am indeed also part of the Inforunners and go on there
You are indeed.
occasionally, and we do talk about the
Mhm.
ships. And I tend to be the one who's least ship educated in the whole group.
Yeah, but we like to have different juxtapositions. We like to different opinions is a strength, in my
Yeah.
opinion, not a weakness.
Yeah.
And if especially if people that are normally of differing opinions on the same page, you know, you kind of it shows that you're onto something. So yeah. But
Agreed.
you know, we sometimes get some very hateful comments when Space Tomato comes along. It's like, why have you got this idiot on? He doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes
He
to ships.
clearly.
But I like having him on so I can learn from a different
No, man,
perspective.
no. People have gotten mad at me for telling folks
I
to
know.
not buy ships. They're like, you make money from covering this game. How dare you tell people to not buy ships? I'm like, how does
Same here,
that
man.
logic make
Well, it's the
sense?
same. It's the same for me, man. Just be yourself, man. Everyone else
Yeah,
be
yeah.
damned.
No, it's
Like-
good.
like-
It's good times.
People kind of seem to like when we were at CitizenCon, it was really weird. We kind of treated like with celebrities, and me and I really just like normal guys, and just like, no, man, it's just good. We're just guys, you know. And I know you're the same Space, and I know Paul's the same as well. Like we're just all guys that really love
I'm
the
not.
game. At the end of the day,
I'm not. I'm a tomato.
oh, you're a tomato.
Don't speak for me.
I want to see a big furry tomato costume at CitizenCon when we meet up. Then, like, it's going
Right
to be
there.
so big that when I go to give you a hug, I can't reach right around.
Oh no, it's gonna be like hugging a Snorlax, dude. A red,
yeah.
red Snorlax. All right, man. Thank you so much for joining me for this talk. It has been a good year.
You're most welcome.
And looking forward to another one with a whole bunch of ships. 27, I think they said. We'll see where they go. Hopefully they're right and they go more gameplay, they go more crafting and refining and stuff. But folks, thank you for listening to this episode or watching it. If you're on YouTube and you don't like YouTube, I understand. Actually, I don't. We do like YouTube. Google, please let us keep doing this. Thank you. But you can go find it on audio platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google, Pocket Casts, wherever you go. We love you there. And if you're on Spotify, you can leave a review and a rating. If you enjoyed this, share it with your friends and Star Citizens so they know where they can go for more random conversation every week about the big topics with different guests. And stay pretty. I'll see you all in 2026. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being
having me.
awesome. Yeah. And I'll catch you all next year.